Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. Today we're talking about a character it's simply impossible not to love. He's the embodiment of kindness and innocence. He was the first to offer Harry a helping hand. He's Rubeus Hagrid. But in the magical world of Harry Potter fans, no character is truly simple. And even Hagrid has inspired a whirlwind of wild, surprising, and sometimes shocking theories. Let's dive into the mysteries hidden beneath the thick beard of Hogwarts' beloved Keeper of Keys. Number 1. Voldemort was afraid of Hagrid. Yes, you heard that right. In the Chamber of Secrets, we learn that Tom Riddle and Hagrid were at Hogwarts at the same time, and Riddle framed Hagrid for opening the chamber. The result? Expulsion. At first, it looks like young Voldemort simply chose an easy target, but some fans believe otherwise, that Riddle saw Hagrid as a genuine threat and decided to take him out early. After all, Hagrid is a half-giant. If he had completed his magical training, he might have become powerful enough to rival even the Dark Lord. Maybe Voldemort simply didn't want to take that risk. Number 2. Hagrid's wand was never really destroyed. Officially, Hagrid's wand was broken after he was expelled from Hogwarts, but he still uses magic. We all remember that iconic pink umbrella. Fans came up with an intriguing theory. What if the wand was never actually destroyed, just repaired? And who else but Dumbledore could have done it? Secretly, using the Elder Wand which he owned at the time. To keep it hidden from the Ministry, the wand was disguised as an umbrella. That means Hagrid isn't just casting spells in his own clumsy way. He's still a proper wizard. Number 3. The door to Fluffy was intentionally easy to open. One of the most debated moments in The Philosopher's Stone is how easily the trio made it past the traps. Especially that first door, guarded by Fluffy, the three-headed dog. Some think this was just a plot hole, but according to one fan theory, it was part of Dumbledore's clever plan. He knew Hagrid was attached to Fluffy and would want to check on him. So he enchanted the door to open with a simple spell, Alohomora, something even a first year could manage. Number 4. Hagrid was the first to talk about Harry's scar. How many times have we heard, "That's Harry Potter, the boy with the lightning scar"? But how did the wizarding world find out about it? After Voldemort's fall, Harry was immediately taken to the Dursleys. So who spilled the beans? The answer might be simple. Only 3 people saw Harry that night: Dumbledore, McGonagal, and Hagrid. McGonagal was strict and secretive, but Hagrid, not exactly known for keeping his mouth shut. Moved by emotion, he might have shared the detail about the strange scar with a few folks, and from there the gossip spread like wildfire. Number 5. Hagrid's mother might not have been a full giantess. One burning fan question: how did a human and a giantess, well, you know. As much as they may have loved each other, the size difference is kind of extreme. But here's the theory. Hagrid's mother, Fridwulfer, wasn't a full-size giantess. She might have been smaller than most of her kind, maybe even a hybrid herself. Remember Grawp, Hagrid's half-brother from Order of the Phoenix? He's significantly shorter than other giants. That makes the love story between Fridwulfer and Hagrid's father a lot more believable. Number 6. Hagrid and Harry were the same age. Mentally, Hagrid often behaves like an overgrown kid. He throws parties, believes in the good in everyone, and blurts out things he probably shouldn't. Fans adore his innocence, usually chalking it up to his giant blood. But another theory says giants mature much more slowly than humans, which means that mentally and emotionally, Hagrid, though over 50, might have been closer in age to Harry than to Dumbledore. That's why he bonded so naturally with the kids. He was one of them at heart. Number 7. Hagrid, a Death Eater, and now the darkest and most outrageous theory of all. What if Hagrid had been on Voldemort's side the whole time? Sounds absurd, right? But let's look at the facts. In the Philosopher's Stone, Hagrid performs some pretty impressive magic. He charms a boat, gives Dudley a pig's tail, and seems totally comfortable using spells. Despite being banned from magic, he kept his wand. He constantly breaks the rules, and, most suspicious of all, he often accidentally gives Harry information that leads him closer to danger. Hard to believe? Absolutely. Hagrid has always been the lovable, gentle giant, but maybe that's exactly why he would have made the perfect spy. No one would ever suspect him. Number 8. Hagrid secretly protected Harry using magical creatures. Hagrid always had a strange collection of creatures. A 3-headed dog named Fluffy, a baby dragon in a wooden crate, a giant brother hidden in the forest. Most saw it as obsession. Just another quirk of the gentle half-giant. But some believe it was more than that. A secret plan, a living shield, built not for Hagrid, but for Harry. In Chamber of Secrets, Fawkes appears out of nowhere, blinding the basilisk and healing Harry's wound. In Order of the Phoenix, Grawp charges through the forest to rescue Hagrid and fight the giants. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Buckbeak lifts Sirius and Harry into the sky, away from the Dementors. These weren't accidents, these were rescues, and in each case the creatures acted like they knew who needed saving. Hagrid never called them soldiers, but he raised them close, taught them loyalty, kept them near Hogwarts. He once told Harry, "What's coming will come, and we'll meet it when it does." Maybe he wasn't just talking about fate. Maybe he was preparing, quietly, patiently, creating a circle of guardians. Creatures too strange for others to understand, but loyal enough to protect the boy who lived. Number 9, Hagrid can cast magic without a wand. It was a stormy night when Hagrid brought Harry across the sea to the hut on the rock. Waves crashed, wind howled, yet the tiny boat moved steady through the water. "How are we getting back?" Harry asked. Hagrid tapped the side of the boat and muttered, "There's ways." No wand, no visible magic. And yet the boat obeyed. Some fans believed this was proof. Hagrid could perform wandless magic. He was expelled from Hogwarts in his 3rd year. His wand snapped. Officially, he wasn't allowed to practice magic. And yet he did. He gave Dudley a pig's tail, lit fires, unlocked doors, always through his pink umbrella, yes, but that might have just been for show. A cover. What if the magic came from him directly? Quiet, controlled, powerful, the kind of magic most wizards never master. Dumbledore knew, of course he did. He let Hagrid teach. He let him keep the wand fragments, and he never stopped him from casting spells. Hagrid once said, "Dumbledore's the greatest headmaster Hogwarts ever had. He saw summit in me when no one else did." Maybe what Dumbledore saw wasn't just kindness. Maybe he saw raw, ancient magic, the kind that doesn't need a wand at all. Number 10. Hagrid is the descendant of a famous wizard. Hagrid always had a way with creatures, not just taming them, but understanding them. Dragons, hippogriffs, even blast-ended scroots. Where others saw danger, he saw trust. Fear never ruled him. Not even with Aragog. Some fans believe this gift wasn't learned. It was inherited, passed down through blood older than Hogwarts itself. The theory says Hagrid is descended from a legendary wizard, someone like Newt Scamander, author of Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. A man who could calm a thunderbird with a whisper and tame creatures no one else dared approach. Scamander lived decades before Hagrid, but the connection feels real. Both were outcasts, both adored magical creatures, both believed beasts deserved love, not fear. In the Chamber of Secrets, when McGonagal asks who opened the chamber, Hagrid says, "I've never, no, Professor. I swear, I didn't." But there's fear in his voice, not guilt, fear of the past, fear of something deeper he can't name. Maybe it wasn't just about Aragog. Maybe it was about a legacy, a power buried in his blood that he never fully understood. Hagrid's bond with animals felt natural, instinctive, as if some ancient line whispered through his hands every time he touched a creature's hide. A gift, a burden. If he truly came from someone like Scamander, it would explain everything. Why the forest bent to him, why monsters listened, why even the darkest beasts never feared his voice. Number 11, Hagrid, always knew Harry had to die. He carried Harry in his arms like a fallen knight. Tears streamed down his face. The forest was silent. The Death Eaters watched. Voldemort smiled. But Hagrid's heart was breaking, not just because he thought Harry was dead, but because deep down he had always known this moment would come. The theory says Hagrid knew the prophecy, maybe not the exact words, but something. Dumbledore trusted him with more than keys and creatures. He trusted him with people, with Harry, and Dumbledore once said, "I trust Hagrid with my life." That kind of trust comes with heavy truths. Hagrid might have known that Harry was meant to die, that Voldemort had to kill him, and that Harry would choose it. That's why Hagrid was always more than a friend. He wasn't just kind, he was protective in a way that felt desperate. In Goblet of Fire, when Rita Skeeter attacked Harry in the press, Hagrid didn't hesitate. "You're a real credit to Dumbledore, Harry." He didn't say it to flatter, he said it like someone holding back a storm, like someone proud of a boy he feared would be lost too soon. When Harry opened his eyes in the forest, alive once more, Hagrid's voice cracked. "Harry, where have you been?" Not just relief, it was disbelief, hope rising from ashes. Maybe Hagrid never believed he'd see him again. Maybe carrying Harry's body wasn't just grief, it was the end of a long, quiet burden. A burden of knowing the boy he loved was born to die. And yet somehow didn't. Number 12, Hagrid will become headmaster of Hogwarts in the future. Years passed, Hogwarts changed, new students, new professors. And eventually Professor McGonagal stepped down. She had led the school through its hardest times, but age caught up. She needed rest. And so the question came, who would lead Hogwarts next? Not a politician, not a pure-blood aristocrat, but someone the castle itself knew and trusted, someone like Rubeus Hagrid. At first, it sounded impossible. Hagrid, the half-giant with a pink umbrella and a heart too big for his chest. But then people remembered. Who stood by Harry from the very beginning? Who carried him from the ruins of Godric's Hollow and later from the forest when everyone thought he had died? Who never left the school, not through war, not through fear? Hagrid, the one who called every student "you great lump" and meant it with love. Dumbledore once said, "It is our choices that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities." Hagrid was never the most polished wizard, but he made the right choices every time. He protected the forest, he defended outcasts, he never gave up on a single creature, human or not. He was what Hogwarts stood for: loyalty, courage, compassion. When Hagrid finally became headmaster, the school didn't just accept him, it bloomed. Students loved him. Creatures returned to the edge of the forest. The walls seemed warmer. Hogsmeade cheered. Even portraits of old headmasters smiled in their frames. The boy who once slept in a wooden hut now sat in the headmaster's chair. And when first years entered the great hall, his booming voice welcomed them home. Number 13, Hagrid secretly controlled the forest and its inhabitants. The Forbidden Forest was no place for children. Dark, wild, crawling with monsters, acromantulas, werewolves, centaurs, creatures that could tear a student apart in seconds. And yet they never did. Not once did the forest pour out its rage onto Hogwarts, not even during the Battle of Hogwarts. Why? Some believe there was a quiet guardian, a figure who kept the chaos in check, Rubeus Hagrid, Aragog, the giant spider feared by all, once said to Harry, "Hagrid is my friend. I do not harm Hagrid's friends." That wasn't just respect. That was loyalty. Deep, ancient loyalty. Aragog had an entire colony at his command. He could have led them into the castle at any time, but he didn't. Not even when Hagrid vanished, not even when food was scarce, because the forest obeyed Hagrid, not out of fear, but out of something older, a bond. Then there were the centaurs, proud, fierce, suspicious of humans. They attacked Dolores Umbridge, they threatened Firenze, but never Hagrid, and never Harry when he was with Hagrid. In Order of the Phoenix, after Hagrid's fight with them, they let him go, angry, bruised, but alive. Who walks away from a herd of furious centaurs? Only someone they respect, someone they see as part of the forest, one of its own. Even the gentle beasts, unicorns, thestrals, hippogriffs, reacted to him differently. Buckbeak, proud and temperamental, let Hagrid lead him like a dog on a leash. The thestrals never shied away, the unicorns never ran. Hagrid didn't just teach about magical creatures, he spoke to them in a way no one else could. He wasn't just the gamekeeper, he was the forest's voice, its peacekeeper, and when darkness moved through those trees it waited, because the forest listened. And Hagrid was still there. Number 14. Hagrid intentionally revealed Fluffy's secret to Quirrell. The leaky cauldron was loud that night. Firelight flickered, mugs clinked. In the corner, Hagrid hunched over a drink, laughing to himself. Beside him sat a nervous man in a purple turban, Professor Quirrell. He asked about magical creatures, dragons, and Dumbledore. Hagrid, flattered and half drunk, didn't hold back. "If you want to get past that dog," he said, lowering his voice, "just play him some music. He'll fall asleep like a baby." Simple. Quick. Deadly. It seemed like an accident, a slip, caused by ale and a soft heart. But what if it wasn't? Some fans believe Hagrid did it on purpose, on Dumbledore's orders. The headmaster knew someone was after the stone. He couldn't expose Quirrell, not yet, so he set a trap. And who better to bait it than Hagrid? Honest, trusting, completely believable. Everyone knew Hagrid couldn't lie to save his life. That was the point. Quirrell took the bait. Days later, he returned to Hogwarts with a magical harp. He played it. Fluffy fell asleep, just like Hagrid said. The path to the Philosopher's Stone opened, but Dumbledore wasn't fooled. He had left the castle on purpose. Let Quirrell make his move. Let Harry walk into the fire. "I make mistakes like the next man," Dumbledore once said, "but I try to keep them small." This was no mistake. It was a move in a larger game. Hagrid, of course, played his part well. Loyal, clumsy, endearing. But perhaps not as clueless as he looked. Dumbledore trusted him with monsters, secrets, and Harry's life, so why not trust him with a trap? All Hagrid had to do was be himself, warm, loose-lipped, safe. Who would suspect the gentle giant of tricking the Dark Lord? And yet, as Quirrell screamed under Harry's touch, far above the chaos, Fluffy snored peacefully in the dark. Number 15. Hagrid might be immortal. When Rubeus Hagrid first storms onto the scene in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, bursting through the door of the hut on the rock and declaring, "You're a wizard, Harry," readers are introduced to more than just a half-giant with a love for magical creatures. They are introduced to a figure who, over the course of 7 years at Hogwarts and beyond, remains a constant, unchanging in appearance, temperament, and spirit. For all the magic in the wizarding world, it is perhaps this constancy that raises an eyebrow. Does Hagrid ever age? Is it possible that the beloved Keeper of Keys and Grounds is, in fact, immortal, or at the very least, aging so slowly that he might witness generations of wizards come and go? In the magical timeline, Hagrid is born in 1928. By the time Harry arrives at Hogwarts in 1991, Hagrid is already 63 years old, yet he appears exactly the same when we meet him again 19 years later at the end of Deathly Hallows during the epilogue set in 2017. He's still alive, still serving as the gamekeeper, still carrying around gigantic pumpkins and fawning over magical beasts with the enthusiasm of a man half his age. His hair, a tangled mass of black shot with grey, doesn't seem much greyer. His face remains unchanged, broad, wild, and beaming. It's as if time is gently walking around him, rather than through him. "Great man, Hagrid," says Slughorn in Half-Blood Prince. "Great heart. Never changed, not in 50 years." While the comment may be interpreted metaphorically, Slughorn was speaking of Hagrid's loyalty and kindness. It's hard not to take it literally too. Hagrid, quite simply, does not change, and wizards notice. To understand this potential anomaly, one must first look at Hagrid's ancestry. He is a half-giant. His mother, Fridwulfa, was a full giantess. His father, a human wizard, raised him after she abandoned the family. Giants are a largely misunderstood species in the wizarding world, often viewed as brutes. Yet they are also powerful, ancient, and bound by magical laws quite different from humans. According to Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, giants can live to be over 200 years old, though few do due to violent lifestyles and poor living conditions. Hagrid, however, isn't a full giant. He is a blend, magical humanity mingled with something much older, much more primal. And in that blend, fans argue, lies the secret to his unusual resistance to aging. Much like house elves, goblins, or centaurs, whose lifespans far exceed those of humans, Hagrid may have inherited a slowed-down biological clock. Consider Grawp, Hagrid's full giant half-brother, introduced in Order of the Phoenix. He is, by all accounts, still quite young, but already massive and strong beyond human comprehension. Yet he, too, shows no sign of aging even 2 years later in Deathly Hallows. Grawp, like Hagrid, seems unchanged, immortal in his stasis. It's possible that giants, like dragons, grow slowly and live long. If so, then Hagrid, with human blood diluting but not eliminating this trait, may still age, just very, very slowly. The theory gains strength when considering other half-creature hybrids. Take Fleur Delacour, whose Velar ancestry gives her unnatural beauty and allure, or Remus Lupin, whose werewolf curse grants him enhanced healing and strength. Magical hybridity often bestows benefits or burdens that go beyond the ordinary. In Hagrid's case, being half-giant may have granted him a kind of time resistance. Not immunity to death, but an aging process that is glacial at best. What's more fascinating is the symbolic layer. Hagrid isn't just a character, he's an anchor. While other professors come and go, while students graduate and the world outside shifts with war and politics, Hagrid remains at the edge of the Forbidden Forest, tending to his pumpkins and hippogriffs. There's something ancient about him, a mythic quality. He is the embodiment of constancy in a world plagued by change, as if he belongs to the land itself. As if Hogwarts would crumble if he ever left. During the Battle of Hogwarts, Hagrid is flung through the air by a Death Eater's curse and taken hostage by giants. He survives. He always survives, even when he's dropped from the sky, tied up, beaten, crushed beneath rubble, he lives. In Goblet of Fire, he tells Harry how he once took on a group of wizards in a pub brawl and walked away with barely a scratch. "You know me," he says, grinning. "I take a lot of hits. Built for it, I suppose." But is it just brute strength, or something more? There's also Dumbledore's curious treatment of Hagrid. While others see Hagrid as clumsy, uneducated, and dangerous, Dumbledore entrusts him with the most delicate of missions, delivering baby Harry, fetching Philosopher's Stone clues, carrying messages to the giants, rescuing students. He trusts Hagrid not only because of loyalty, but perhaps because he knows there is something more to him. Dumbledore, with his penchant for secrets, may have suspected or known of Hagrid's unique biological gifts. "I would trust Hagrid with my life," he says, "but what if the life Hagrid carries is something beyond the mortal span? Even Voldemort never tries to kill Hagrid. This is significant. He curses, slaughters, and annihilates without hesitation, but he never aims Avada Kedavra at Hagrid. Is it possible he knows or suspects that it would be futile? That Hagrid's blood, thick with giant magic, might resist the unforgivable? In Deathly Hallows, Hagrid is captured, dragged before Voldemort himself, and survives. If Voldemort saw him as a true threat, wouldn't he have ensured Hagrid's death? Instead, he is thrown aside like a puzzle, yet unsolved. The books also hint at Hagrid's unique relationship with time through subtle language. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Harry notes that Hagrid looked just as he had 2 years ago. While 2 years may seem insignificant, it's noteworthy because Harry observes other teachers aging. McGonagal's hair becomes more grey, Flitwick grows more frail. Even Dumbledore, though wise and powerful, shows signs of wear. Hagrid does not. Number 16, Hagrid, was the one who found Tom Riddle's diary. It was a dark, stormy evening at the edge of the Forbidden Forest sometime in the early 1970s. Rubeus Hagrid, keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts, was trudging through the underbrush, dragging a massive sack of thestral feed. The rain soaked his beard, and Fang panted behind him, whining at every thunderclap. The forest was restless that night, as if something deep inside had awakened. Hagrid muttered to himself about the damp and how Dumbledore ought to let him build a proper shed for the creatures. But even Hagrid, as brave and massive as he was, felt an unusual chill crawl up his spine that evening. He paused at the roots of an ancient tree, one with bark blackened by lightning long ago. Fang growled lowly. That's when Hagrid saw it, a small rectangular object, half buried under moss and leaves, glistening faintly in the torchlight. Curiosity stirred in his gut. He bent down, wiped the mud off, and found a black, leather-bound diary, the spine still intact, though aged. The cover bore no name, only a cold, polished surface. No magical signature struck him, no dark aura warned him off. Hagrid wasn't trained in such subtle matters. He slipped it into his coat, assuming it had belonged to a student who had lost it years ago. Perhaps someone from Slytherin House. He muttered that he'd ask Professor Slughorn about it later. What Hagrid couldn't know, was that the object he had just found was no ordinary diary. It was one of Voldemort's Horcruxes. It was the very diary Tom Marvolo Riddle had used decades earlier to manipulate events, frame Hagrid, and unleash the basilisk. And now fate had twisted again to put it back into Hagrid's hands. Back at his hut, he placed the diary on a shelf next to his collection of dragon scales and acromantula teeth, where it gathered dust for years. He forgot about it, but as time passed, odd things began to happen. Fang refused to enter the room where the diary lay. Occasionally, Hagrid would hear whispers at night, faint, like the rustling of leaves. He blamed the wind, the forest, or Peeves. Hagrid was a man of simple convictions. He never imagined a book could be alive. The real question that has haunted some fans for years is this: how did Lucius Malfoy get the diary? We know from Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets that Lucius slipped it into Ginny Weasley's cauldron at Flourish and Blots. But J.K. Rowling never explains precisely how Lucius came into possession of one of Voldemort's most powerful artifacts. It was unlikely Voldemort entrusted it to him directly. At the time of his downfall in 1981, Voldemort was reduced to a spectral form, and Lucius had already begun distancing himself from the Dark Lord's cause to avoid Azkaban. So when and where did he acquire the diary? One compelling theory among the more lore-attentive fans suggests that Hagrid was the link in that chain, an innocent, oblivious pawn in a much larger game. It was Hagrid who, after being expelled from Hogwarts in 1943 due to Tom Riddle's false accusations, might have unknowingly stumbled upon the very artifact that would later nearly destroy the school again. The irony is thick, poetic even. The same man who lost everything because of Tom Riddle might have, without knowing, returned the key to his dark resurrection. Consider this. Sometime in the late 1960s or early 1970s, a young Lucius Malfoy was attending Hogwarts. His father, Abraxas Malfoy, held significant influence within the ministry, and the Malfoys were known for their deep connections within the Slytherin elite. Hagrid, at that time, was already working on the grounds under Dumbledore's protection. It's not a stretch to imagine that during his rounds, Hagrid mentioned the strange diary he'd found in the forest to a curious student, or even absent-mindedly showed it to someone. Lucius, always on the lookout for powerful magical items, may have seen the diary in Hagrid's hut during a visit or detention. Hagrid had a soft spot for some students, even Slytherins, as long as they didn't harm magical creatures. It's entirely plausible that Lucius, sensing something peculiar in the book, stole it. Or perhaps he sweet-talked Hagrid into giving it to him, convincing him it was a valuable relic that belonged in a museum or in the hands of someone who would take care of it. In Chamber of Secrets, Dumbledore hints at the diary's power, stating, "Lord Voldemort put a bit of himself in me," to which Harry responds, "But he transferred some of his powers to me when he gave me that scar." Dumbledore nods, continuing, "Voldemort put a piece of his soul in that diary." If Lucius had known the diary was a Horcrux, would he have dared use it so recklessly? Or did he perhaps only sense that it was powerful and dark, something worthy of slipping into a Muggle-born girl's bag to cause chaos and discredit Arthur Weasley? The theory of Hagrid's involvement becomes even more intriguing when you consider how isolated he was from mainstream magical society. He was not educated in dark arts detection. He never finished his schooling. He couldn't even perform magic properly due to his broken wand hidden in his pink umbrella. If Hagrid stumbled upon a Horcrux, he would have had no idea what it was. To him, it was just a diary. There's another eerie possibility. What if the diary wanted to be found? Horcruxes are not passive. In Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore tells Harry, to confide a part of your soul to a diary is, well, not just egotistical, but dangerous in the extreme. Riddle's diary had sentience. It could tempt. It could lure. If it was lying in the forest, it may have drawn Hagrid toward it, just as it later drew Ginny in, whispering promises and secrets. Number 17, Hagrid could communicate with all magical creatures. Rubeus Hagrid had many unusual traits: his half-giant heritage, his affinity for the forbidden, and his unmistakable compassion. But among them all, one stood out like a thunderclap in the quiet of the Forbidden Forest: his uncanny ability to communicate with magical creatures, not merely feed or care for them, but speak to them, understand them, befriend them. It was a talent so overlooked, so deeply embedded in his personality, that few ever questioned its origin. But those who looked closely, who dared to question the impossible, began to wonder, was Hagrid gifted with a rare form of magical speech? A gift akin to Parseltongue, but one that transcended species? From his first appearance, Hagrid's bond with magical beasts was evident. "Galloping Gorgons!" he exclaimed, clutching the massive motorcycle on which he flew baby Harry to safety. But what truly captured attention wasn't the flying bike, it was the way he handled Norbert A., the Norwegian ridgeback dragon, as if it were no more fearsome than a teething puppy. When Ron's hand was nearly bitten off, Hagrid remained unfazed, murmuring gently to the hatchling, "Norbert's just a baby, he doesn't know better." Norbert responded, not with another bite, but with a soft, gurgling sound. That night, in the candlelight of his wooden hut, Hagrid hummed dragon lullabies no one had taught him. Where had he learned them? Later, in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, we meet Buckbeak, the proud hippogriff. These creatures are known for their volatile temper and fierce loyalty. One wrong move, one disrespectful gesture, and you might lose your face. Yet in Hagrid's hands, Buckbeak bowed, not only bowed, but permitted Harry to ride him, soaring over the Black Lake. It was Hagrid who whispered, "You've got to show him respect. Bow first." But where did that knowledge come from? Books? Trial and error? Or was it something deeper, an understanding that went beyond gestures and entered the realm of pure connection? When others saw monsters, Hagrid saw friends. Take Aragog, the acromantula, a spider the size of a horse, with gleaming black eyes and venomous fangs, a creature whose children would gladly devour any human. Yet Aragog considered Hagrid his friend and protector. In the Chamber of Secrets, when Harry and Ron stumble into the spider's lair, it is Aragog himself who says, "Hagrid has never sent men into our hollow before. Hagrid is my friend." How does one earn such loyalty from a creature who feasts on flesh? It wasn't bravery, it wasn't food, it was something unspoken, a dialogue perhaps only Hagrid could carry. The most telling case, however, was Grawp, a full giant standing 16 feet tall, prone to unpredictable violence and virtually impossible to tame. Dumbledore had sent no auras, no experts in diplomacy, but Hagrid, armed with nothing but gentleness. "Grawpy, this is Hermione," Hagrid introduced them, as if presenting guests at a tea party. Grawp, who had been throwing boulders the day before, stared and grunted, but did not strike. He began to recognize Hagrid's voice, his words, even forming his own in reply. "Hagger," he'd murmur, trying to say the name of the only being who ever spoke to him like an equal. Giants had no written language, and barely a spoken one. Yet Hagrid bridged the chasm. There are theories that magical creatures communicate through emotions, through vibrations of magical aura, not unlike legilimency, but broader in its reach. And perhaps Hagrid, with his unique bloodline, possessed the rare ability to receive and transmit those signals. Much like a Parselmouth can hear the whisper of serpents, Hagrid might have been able to feel the intentions of beasts and answer with instinctive understanding. That would explain why he was never truly afraid, not of Fluffy, the three-headed dog guarding the Philosopher's Stone, nor of Thestrals, nor even of Dementors in the forest. Creatures recognize something in him. Let us not forget Fluffy. When Hagrid introduces the massive beast, he casually says, "Just play him a bit of music, and he'll fall right asleep." Most wizards would have considered a Cerberus a death sentence. Hagrid treats him like a pet hamster. He doesn't need a leash or a wand, just a tune and a calm voice. Could he have spoken to Fluffy in more ways than music? Perhaps that was only a trick for humans. Maybe, for Hagrid, Fluffy required no melody at all, just his presence. The centaurs of the Forbidden Forest, proud and aloof, made it clear they disliked human interference. But Hagrid, despite being half-human, earned a wary respect. Bane and Firenze argued often, but never dismissed Hagrid outright. When Harry was nearly trampled by an enraged herd, it was Hagrid who diffused the tension. "They're proud creatures, centaurs," he explained. "They don't like being bossed around." He didn't plead for mercy, he reasoned with them, spoke to them in a tongue they seemed to accept. Was it only diplomacy, or was it something deeper, something woven into his being? In the Goblet of Fire, Hagrid is revealed to be part giant, and for a while the wizarding world recoils, but his connection to magical creatures only strengthens. During the Triwizard Tournament, he shows Harry the dragons, and they obey him. Massive beasts, chained and furious, roaring flames into the sky, yet they do not harm Hagrid. "They've got a kind of rudimentary intelligence," he tells Harry, "but you got to treat 'em with respect." He steps among them with ease, muttering words under his breath. The horntail shifts but does not strike. No spell is cast. What did he say? Even the thestrals, skeletal winged horses that only those who have witnessed death can see, showed no fear around Hagrid. In Order of the Phoenix, he uses them to transport students. "Thestrals don't mind pulling the carriages," he says, patting one gently. Luna Lovegood, who shares a similar gentle intuition, notes that they're gentle really, but people avoid them because they look scary. Hagrid never avoided them. He rode them, trusted them. They followed. Number 18, Hagrid knew where a Horcrux was but stayed silent. When the trio began their desperate hunt for Voldemort's Horcruxes, they were stumbling through shadows with only riddles to guide them. Dumbledore had died, the secrets had died with him, and every day brought new peril. Yet among the Order of the Phoenix, there was one man who had walked unknowingly through the very heart of the Horcrux mystery, long before Harry ever uttered the word. That man was Rubeus Hagrid. It was Grimmauld Place, number 12, concealed in the heart of London by the Fidelius charm, that held the key. After the Order of the Phoenix reclaimed the old Black family home as headquarters, the members began cleaning out the darkness that clung to every corner. There were boggarts in closets, cursed music boxes, ghastly portraits, and sinister heirlooms. Most members passed these objects by with wary disgust, but Hagrid, with his deep sensitivity to magical creatures and magical energy alike, may have noticed more than he let on. The locket, heavy, golden, cold, sat among the other trinkets in the drawing-room cabinet. It didn't open, though Mundungus Fletcher tried to nick it more than once. It didn't shimmer or glow, but it felt wrong. It was Creature, the house elf, who knew its history. It had once belonged to his beloved master, Regulus Arcturus Black, but Hagrid, though no scholar of dark magic, had a heart tuned to danger and sorrow. The locket, some say, vibrated with an aura of pain, a subtle poison in the air. Could Hagrid have felt it? There's a passage in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix that fans often overlook. As the trio helps Molly Weasley clean the house, they come across a heavy locket that none of them could open. Hagrid was in and out of the house during these days, feeding Buckbeak, meeting with Dumbledore, drinking with Sirius. Was it possible, just possible, that his half-giant senses, so attuned to magical presence, told him that this object was not just cursed, but something else? Hagrid wasn't a fool, though the world often treated him as one. His education may have been cut short, but his instincts were sharp. He could tell a werewolf by scent. He could feel the sorrow of a thestral before it spoke. When Norbert the dragon hatchling writhed in his arms, he knew it wasn't just a pet, but a force of wild, ancient energy. Could the locket have stirred something similar? A warning, perhaps? A whisper in the blood? And if he did sense something dark in the locket, why didn't he say anything? Here's where the theory grows more haunting. Perhaps Hagrid did know, or at least suspect, but he chose silence. Not out of cowardice, he had never lacked courage, but out of trust. Trust in Dumbledore, trust in the plan that the old wizard never fully shared. After all, Hagrid had carried Harry through fire and ruin. He had faced giants. He had never betrayed a secret Dumbledore asked him to keep. There's another curious passage, and this time in Half-Blood Prince, when Hagrid speaks of Dumbledore's burdens. He's got a lot on his plate, he says, always has. What if one of those burdens was the knowledge of Horcruxes? What if Dumbledore, knowing the danger, had hinted to Hagrid not to meddle with certain items? What if Hagrid saw the locket, felt its wrongness, and then made the conscious decision to leave it untouched, because Albus would handle it? There is, of course, the possibility that Hagrid's silence wasn't a calculated decision, but a form of emotional denial. Think of Aragog, think of Grawp. Hagrid has always looked at the monstrous and tried to see the beautiful. What if he felt the locket's darkness and, rather than confront it, chose to ignore it, to hope it would fade, that someone else would deal with it? He had, after all, lost so many friends by then. Maybe he couldn't face another horror lurking beneath the floorboards of Grimmauld Place. Yet silence is not the same as ignorance. Even Creature knew the locket had been replaced. He told Harry, eventually, the truth about Regulus's sacrifice. "Master Regulus said he must not tell anyone," Creature whispered, trembling. But he remembered. And if a house elf could remember, couldn't Hagrid? Mundungus Fletcher, that petty thief and rogue, eventually stole the locket from the house. Hagrid was furious at Fletcher for many things, but not, interestingly, for this. When Harry confronts Dung about his thefts in Deathly Hallows, it's Kingsley and Lupin who speak most. Hagrid barely reacts. Could it be because he already suspected where the locket had gone and what it really was? We must not forget that Hagrid was one of the first people to speak Voldemort's name aloud. "There's not a soul alive who's seen you-know-who and lived to tell the tale," he tells Harry in Philosopher's Stone. "Not counting you, of course, and maybe Dumbledore." He feared Voldemort, but he also understood him in a way few others did. They both came from pain. Both were half-bloods rejected by the world. Could Hagrid have sensed the soul-splitting madness that clung to that locket? The true test of this theory lies not just in what Hagrid may have known, but in what he chose to do after Dumbledore's death. If he suspected the locket, why didn't he tell Harry? Why didn't he search for it himself? Why didn't he march back into Grimmauld Place and rip open every drawer? Perhaps he feared being wrong. Perhaps he believed the war had passed him by, or perhaps the knowledge was too terrible to face without Dumbledore by his side. And then there is the forest. The Forbidden Forest, Hagrid's home, his sanctuary, deep, magical, ancient. It is here that he brings Harry when all else has failed. It is here that Voldemort finally kills him, or believes he does. Perhaps this is not coincidence. Perhaps Hagrid knew that only nature, wild and true, could survive the darkness. And perhaps he hoped that by keeping one secret locked away in the House of Black, he was giving Harry a chance to find it on his own when the time was right. One could argue that Hagrid didn't understand the nature of a Horcrux, that he'd never even heard the word. And yet, when Harry mentions in Half-Blood Prince that Dumbledore is collecting memories, Hagrid becomes visibly uncomfortable. "That's between him and the headmaster, that is," he mutters. Why so defensive? Why so evasive? Could it be that Hagrid had heard whispers? That he had been told just enough to stay quiet? What's more, Hagrid never speaks of Regulus Black, not once, not even when Sirius dies, not when Creature wails in grief, not when the tapestry is revealed. Why? Because Hagrid, who knew every creature in the forest by name, had to have known the story, or suspected it. And perhaps he knew that the locket was tied not just to Voldemort's evil, but to Sirius's shame. And he couldn't bear to tarnish the memory of his fallen friend by opening that door. One of the saddest truths in the Harry Potter saga is that Hagrid, for all his strength, is often underestimated. He is treated as comic relief, as the gentle oaf with a pink umbrella. But again and again Rowling paints him with shadows, his exile, his brother, his loneliness, his drinking, his secrets. Could this be one of them? That he bore the weight of the Horcrux without ever confessing it. Imagine the moment then, the trio in the woods, the locket around Harry's neck, whispering lies, Ron gone, Hermione silent. Harry, staring into the fire, asks himself how many people knew about these things and never said a word. He never blames Hagrid, but what if in some corner of his heart, he wonders, there are no easy answers in war, only choices, and Hagrid, beloved of beasts, protector of the lost, may have made the hardest choice of all, to let Harry walk the path of fire without a map, because sometimes to reveal a truth too early is to destroy hope. And Hagrid, above all, never wanted to see Harry lose hope. He carried Harry from the wreckage of his parents' house. He carried him from the forest to his final stand, and somewhere in between, perhaps he carried a secret too heavy to name, a locket, a feeling, a silence, not out of malice, but out of love, and that in the end is the most Hagrid thing of all. Number 19. Hagrid's umbrella is an ancient artifact. Of all the peculiarities in the Harry Potter universe, few are as curiously overlooked as the pink umbrella carried by Rubeus Hagrid, a half-giant known for his tenderness toward magical beasts and his fierce loyalty to Dumbledore. Hagrid isn't the most obvious candidate for harboring a powerful magical artifact, and yet there's something strange about that umbrella, something that doesn't quite add up. It's not just a quirky accessory, it might be one of the most ancient magical objects quietly hiding in plain sight. We know from Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone that Hagrid was expelled from Hogwarts in his 3rd year after being falsely accused of opening the Chamber of Secrets. His wand was supposedly snapped in two. Normally, such an event would mean the end of a wizard's magical abilities, especially one who hadn't even finished his education. Yet Hagrid still performs magic, rough, unrefined, but undeniably real. How? I'm not supposed to do magic, strictly speaking, but I've got a few tricks up me sleeve, Hagrid admits to Harry during their first meeting. And then he casually taps the bricks behind the leaky cauldron with his pink umbrella, opening the passage to Diagon Alley. How does a man with a broken wand continue to perform magic? That's the first puzzle. The second is this: why didn't Dumbledore simply get Hagrid a new wand once he had been cleared of the original accusation? By the time of the Chamber of Secrets, Tom Riddle's true role in framing Hagrid was known. Surely, as the headmaster of Hogwarts and a member of the Wizengamot, Dumbledore had the influence to reverse the judgment. But instead of getting Hagrid a new wand, he let him keep using the umbrella. This decision, often seen as sentimental, could suggest something deeper. That Dumbledore knew exactly what the umbrella was. There's a theory circulating among the most dedicated fans, one that has never been confirmed, yet seems more and more plausible the deeper you look. The idea is this: Hagrid's umbrella isn't just hiding a broken wand, it is the wand. Or more precisely, it contains a piece of the wand fused with an older, far more powerful magical conduit. The umbrella in this theory is a relic from an earlier era, a magical amplifier crafted by an unknown wizard, designed not just to house magic, but to enhance it. That would explain how Hagrid manages to produce spells despite his lack of formal training and a broken wand. If true, that would mean Hagrid is using what amounts to a magical artifact on par with the Elder Wand, not in destructive power perhaps, but in rare functionality. And Dumbledore, who had a particular interest in rare and powerful magical objects, would have been just the kind of person to both recognize and reassign such an item. After all, Dumbledore himself owned the Elder Wand. He wasn't unfamiliar with channeling magic through items steeped in history. Let's consider the example of the Deluminator. Created by Dumbledore himself, it's capable not only of snuffing out lights, but of guiding people toward what they most need. It's a multifunctional magical tool disguised as something mundane. Hagrid's umbrella could be a similar object, an unassuming exterior, hiding something ancient and extraordinary. J.K. Rowling never specifies who made it, but the timing of Hagrid's expulsion and his continued ability to perform magic suggests someone went out of their way to make sure he wasn't cut off entirely. There are rumours in old wizarding texts of objects called arcane vessels, tools that could hold or enhance a wizard's power, especially when that power was damaged or incomplete. These vessels were used during the early wizarding wars of the 12th century, when wands were unstable and magic had to be conducted through other mediums. A carved staff, a walking cane, even a blade. These objects served as magical focuses. One such tale, buried in the chronicles of Eldritch Britain, speaks of a scarlet rod that amplified spells tenfold when wielded by a magician who had lost his wand hand. It's possible Dumbledore, with his deep knowledge of history and artifacts, came across one of these items and repurposed it for Hagrid. But why would Dumbledore go to such lengths for someone who was, at that time, just a gamekeeper? The answer lies not only in Dumbledore's well-known compassion, but in his belief in second chances. "I would trust Hagrid with my life," he told Minerva McGonagal in Philosopher's Stone. "It's not just affection, it's faith in someone the world had thrown away." Giving Hagrid a powerful magical relic disguised as a silly pink umbrella may have been both a gift and a statement that Hagrid still belonged in the magical world. There's also the question of colour. Why pink? It's so out of character, and that may be the point. The pink umbrella draws mockery, making Hagrid's magic seem less threatening, less serious. In a world where perception matters, especially for someone with Hagrid's background and size, the disguise works in his favour. Wizards and witches dismiss it, and him, as harmless. But magic, as Dumbledore himself said, often lies in unexpected places. A pink umbrella could be the perfect camouflage for an object of great significance. When Hagrid uses the umbrella to produce fire or to stun a creature, there's an instinctive, almost primal quality to the magic. It doesn't follow the rules taught at Hogwarts. It comes from somewhere deeper, more emotional. This kind of raw magic is reminiscent of Wandless magic, a skill only the most powerful or desperate can use. If Hagrid is channeling a combination of Wandless energy and a relic's amplification that would explain both the crudeness and the potency of his spells. Consider the scene in Chamber of Secrets when Hagrid is being taken to Azkaban. He doesn't resist, but he makes a cryptic remark. If anyone wanted to find out some stuff, all they'd have to do would be to follow the spiders. Even in that moment of defeat, he holds a calm assurance. It's as if he knows more than he lets on, not just about the creatures of the Forbidden Forest, but about his own abilities. He isn't powerless, no matter what the Ministry thinks. If the umbrella is a relic, where did it come from? Some speculate it might have belonged to Ethelrida Spindlehurst, a long-forgotten enchantress known for crafting magical tools disguised as household items. Her creations were banned by the Ministry after one of them, an enchanted teapot, accidentally triggered a rainstorm that lasted a week. Spindlehurst's items were rumoured to be scattered across Britain, hidden in old wizarding homes. It's not impossible that one of them ended up in Dumbledore's possession, especially considering his fondness for collecting odd magical items. Another theory links the umbrella to the era of the Founders. Helga Hufflepuff was known for crafting magical objects that helped those in need, her enchanted cup being the most famous example. It's possible that a lesser-known Hufflepuff artifact was passed down through the centuries until it reached Dumbledore, himself a proud Gryffindor, but known to admire Helga's values. Giving that kind of object to Hagrid would have been in keeping with Hufflepuff's spirit, loyalty, kindness, and strength through support. Of course, there's no official record of such a relic being registered with the Department of Magical Artifacts, but then many such items were intentionally kept off the books, especially those with unstable magical signatures. The Ministry wouldn't want a half-giant in possession of an unlicensed magical relic, even if it was safe. Dumbledore, who often skirted the edges of the law for what he believed was right, may have decided the risk was worth it. There's also the curious case of Ollivander. He remembers every wand he's ever sold. Yet when Harry mentions Hagrid's pink umbrella, Ollivander doesn't say a word. Why? Either he doesn't recognize the umbrella's magic, which is unlikely, or he recognizes it too well. Perhaps he knew of its original owner, or even helped Dumbledore reconstruct the broken wand inside it. Ollivander was known for crafting bespoke magical cores. What if he embedded a rare magical core into the umbrella's handle to amplify Hagrid's fragmented magic? Some even go so far as to believe the umbrella may contain part of another wizard's wand, perhaps even Dumbledore's own previous wand, used before he claimed the Elder Wand. That would explain the powerful aura around the object, and why Hagrid's spells, though few and far between, are effective despite his lack of formal magical control. There's a sense of poetic justice to it all. A man cast out of the magical community, falsely accused and denied education, ends up wielding an ancient object of power, not for vengeance, but for kindness. Hagrid never uses his magic for attack. He uses it to help, to heal, to protect. In this way, the artifact reflects its master. It amplifies not just his magic, but his intent. In The Half-Blood Prince, we see Hagrid use the umbrella to produce fire with nothing more than a tap. There's no incantation, no wand movement, just intent. That kind of control is beyond a third-year dropout. It speaks to something deeper. Perhaps the umbrella responds not just to Hagrid's magic, but to his heart. And that may be its true enchantment, that it chooses to work only for those who are truly good. Whatever the truth, the pink umbrella remains one of the most enigmatic objects in the wizarding world. It stands as a symbol not just of Dumbledore's trust in Hagrid, but of the forgotten magic that still lingers in hidden corners, waiting for someone kind enough, loyal enough, and brave enough to wield it. Whether ancient relic or cleverly disguised wand, it has served its purpose not through power, but through compassion. And in a world obsessed with strength, that might be the most magical thing of all. Number 20. Hagrid and his father were outcasts. There was always something different about Rubeus Hagrid. Even before the whispers of his expulsion from Hogwarts, before the accusations of harbouring Aragog in the depths of the castle, Hagrid had already been marked not just by his immense size, but by something far more subtle, far more tragic. "My dad raised me, never knew me, Mum," he once told Harry, with a shadow of loss in his voice. But what if there was more to that story? What if Hagrid and his father were not just a broken family unit, but exiles from the heart of wizarding society itself? It begins with Hagrid's father, a small man by all accounts. Tiny little bloke my dad was. By the time I was 6, I could lift him up with one hand, Hagrid said, almost chuckling, though the pain behind his words was evident. No records exist of Hagrid's father's name in any of the wizarding family registries, nor is there mention of his professional or social life before or after Hagrid's birth. For someone who fathered a half-giant in a magical society obsessed with bloodlines, that silence is deafening. It suggests erasure, voluntary or enforced. Some fans have proposed that Hagrid's father may have been part of a fringe group within the wizarding world, one that defied the rigid hierarchy of magical beings and fought to protect the rights of magical creatures. In a society where centaurs, goblins, and giants are routinely ostracized, it would not be far-fetched to imagine that someone advocating for their protection and integration would be labeled a traitor. The Ministry of Magic, particularly under the control of figures like Barty Crouch Sr., was known for its authoritarian stance on non-human magical beings. Control them, regulate them, or remove them was an unspoken mantra, visible in the relentless surveillance of centaurs in the Forbidden Forest and the brutal campaigns against giants. If Hagrid's father stood against that tide, especially if he fell in love with a giantess like Fridwulfa, it would be no surprise if he and his unborn child were branded as outcasts. The mere fact that Hagrid's mother was a giantess already placed him at the margins. Giants were considered dangerous, volatile, untrustworthy. Fridwulfa abandoned her child, returning to her own kind, if not out of cruelty, then perhaps out of necessity. Could it be that both parents were being hunted? That Fridwulfa's return to the mountains was an escape rather than a rejection? Her relationship with a wizard would have been condemned by both human and giant communities. Yet it was Hagrid's father who stayed, raising a child who grew to tower above him with a heart far bigger than his hands. But Hagrid never had a place in the wizarding world, not truly. From the start he was relegated to the edge, both physically, in his hut, on the fringe of Hogwarts grounds, and socially. His affinity for creatures like blast-ended scroots, hippogriffs and dragons, beings feared and misunderstood, was not merely eccentricity, it was legacy. He cared for those no one else would. His position as Keeper of Keys and Grounds was Dumbledore's doing, a quiet act of mercy by the only man willing to stand beside the outcast child of a forbidden union. When Hagrid was expelled in his 3rd year at Hogwarts following the accusation that he had opened the Chamber of Secrets, the Ministry wasted no time. He was expelled right after Tom Riddle accused him, Professor McGonagal later recalled. But it's worth remembering how swift and unquestioned that expulsion was. No trial, no inquiry, just immediate punishment. Why? Because Hagrid was already viewed as suspicious, not just because he was big, not just because he liked monsters, but because he was a half-giant. His very blood was a stain in the eyes of the law. And yet Dumbledore stood by him. He allowed Hagrid to stay on the school grounds, even entrusted him with key roles. Some would call it compassion, others might call it loyalty, to a friend, or perhaps to an old cause. There are whispers, especially in the older circles of magical historians, of a conflict before the First Wizarding War. A quiet movement, one that sought to protect magical creatures and those like them from the increasingly oppressive Ministry. Dumbledore, who once studied the philosophies of equality with Gellert Grindelwald before their ideologies diverged, may have seen in Hagrid's father a kindred spirit. If that's true, then Hagrid's presence at Hogwarts was not just charity, it was allegiance. Hagrid's own attitude toward the Ministry was never particularly respectful. He often bristled at authority, distrusted figures like Cornelius Fudge, and dreaded the arrival of Ministry officials on school grounds. "They never trusted me," he told Harry during the events of the Order of the Phoenix, after he had been attacked by Ministry auras. Not once, not ever. The pain in those words is rooted in more than personal injury. It's generational. If Hagrid's father was once cast out, possibly prosecuted or silenced for his beliefs, then his son would have inherited both the suspicion and the fear. The more one looks at Hagrid's life, the more the pieces align. His deep loyalty to Dumbledore, his need to prove himself, his clumsiness that often masks an intelligence shaped outside the typical magical education. He is not ignorant, he's educated differently, taught by his father perhaps, in the ways of the creatures the rest of the world sought to destroy. His fascination with dragons, which he considered misunderstood, and his ability to approach centaurs with respect, not fear, speaks of teachings passed down from someone who lived with and believed in these beings. And what of his time with Grawp, his half-brother? Most saw Grawp as a danger, a liability. But Hagrid insisted on bringing him to Hogwarts. "He's my brother," he explained simply. But it wasn't just about family, it was about justice. A chance, perhaps, to give Grawp the inclusion that Hagrid himself was denied, a small act of redemption. If his own father had tried to build a bridge between worlds and failed, then Hagrid would not repeat that failure. He would teach Grawp to speak, to listen, to trust. There's a strange poetry in the fact that Hagrid never uses a wand. Broken during his expulsion, his wand remains hidden inside a pink umbrella. But what if it was never just about being expelled? What if wand usage was also tied to something more ancient, some deeper sanction placed on him, inherited from a family name erased from history? The Ministry might have placed an enchantment on his wand to suppress his magic, not because of Aragog, but because of what his family represented. A symbolic punishment for a lineage that defied the order of magical blood and class. His bond with creatures speaks louder than any spell. In Prisoner of Azkaban, he weeps when Buckbeak is sentenced to death despite the animal having done no wrong. He's not dangerous, Hagrid protests. He's beautiful. That moment isn't just emotional, it's political. A cry against a system that destroys what it doesn't understand. Hagrid isn't just defending Buckbeak, he's defending his own blood, his heritage, his very right to belong. Even in the final battle, when Hagrid carries Harry's seemingly lifeless body, there's a depth of emotion in his grief that goes beyond loss. It is the sorrow of someone who has carried too many dead, lost too many battles for acceptance. "No, no, Harry, no!" he screams, not just for a friend, but for the boy who never judged him, never questioned his place. The boy who, like Dumbledore, saw him not as a creature, but as a man. There's also the mystery of where Hagrid lived as a child. He speaks of a cottage where he and his father resided, but there are no records of their dwelling in wizarding settlements like Ottery St. Catchpole or Godric's Hollow. Could it be that they lived in hiding, perhaps on the edges of the Forbidden Forest? A place close enough to Hogwarts to offer some protection, but remote enough to stay unnoticed. That would explain Hagrid's uncanny knowledge of the forest paths, his rapport with its many creatures, and his ability to disappear into its shadows without fear. The Forbidden Forest was never truly forbidden to him. It was home. Perhaps even the last sanctuary left to his family after their fall from grace. In that forest live centaurs who remember old wars, acromantulas who owe Hagrid their survival, and unicorns who approach him without fear. It is a kingdom for the cast out and the misunderstood. And Hagrid, its gentle, giant ruler, walks its paths with the quiet dignity of someone who has lost a homeland and built a new one among beasts. In many ways, Hagrid's story mirrors that of Remus Lupin, another outsider whose worth was measured not by his affliction, but by his heart. But where Lupin had to hide, Hagrid was never given that choice. His body gave him away. He could never pass as one of them. He was too large, too hairy, too loud. But within that body was a soul shaped by loneliness, love, and a relentless determination to protect those no one else would. It is no accident that when Hagrid enters the Great Hall, heads turn. Not out of fear, but out of something close to reverence. Because despite the way the world treated him, Hagrid never turned to hate. He never joined the dark forces, never sought revenge. He chose love, for dragons, for hippogriffs, for misfits and orphans, for Hogwarts, for Harry. Perhaps the deepest tragedy of Hagrid's life is not the loss of his mother or the persecution of the Ministry, but the silence surrounding his father's past. A silence so complete that it erased his name, his history, his crimes, or his courage. All that remains is the man he raised, a man of immense strength and even greater heart. In the end, we are left with a question. What did Hagrid's father do to be erased from magical society? Was he a traitor or a hero forgotten by history? Was he a revolutionary silenced before his time? Whatever the truth, It lives on in Hagrid, in every creature he protects, in every student he teaches, and in every act of loyalty he gives, even when the world gives him none in return. Number 21. Hagrid was secretly in love with McGonagal. It was never stated outright, never confirmed with a glance, a whisper, or a letter tucked between dusty bookshelves of the Hogwarts library. Yet, among the enchanted corridors of that ancient castle, whispers existed of a quiet, enduring affection that perhaps went unnoticed by most. Rubeus Hagrid, the half-giant with a heart as vast as the Forbidden Forest, may have loved someone silently for decades, and that someone, none other than Professor Minerva McGonagal. It may seem improbable at first glance. Hagrid, clumsy, gentle, fond of dangerous creatures. McGonagal, strict, composed, the very embodiment of discipline and reason. But love, as every witch and wizard knows, rarely follows logic. It blooms in unexpected places, between unlikely hearts. And the bond between these two professors, forged through years of loyalty and shared battles, holds the kind of subtle weight that invites speculation. Their relationship was professional, yes, but not cold. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, when McGonagall first introduces Harry to Quidditch, it is Hagrid who reacts with pride and warmth, deeply moved by the boy's inclusion in the school. "Knew he'd be in Gryffindor," Hagrid beams. And, while this line is about Harry, McGonagall's quiet nod to Hagrid, her faint smile in response, hints at a shared moment between two guardians watching over a child. There's something familial in their glances, but perhaps, just perhaps, something more. Consider the way Hagrid always referred to McGonagall. Professor McGonagall came from his lips with deep respect, never a trace of jest. He could be irreverent with Dumbledore, cheeky with students, even slightly awkward around Madame Pomfrey. But with McGonagall there was reverence, not fear, not mere authority, reverence, as though speaking of someone he held in a different light. Hagrid never married. He never spoke of past romances, except for his bashful attraction to Madame Olympe Maxime during the Triwizard Tournament. But even that affection was hesitant, almost sheepish. When Hermione asked him in the Goblet of Fire if he liked Madame Maxime, he turned crimson and muttered, She's interesting, that's all." But the way he carried himself around McGonagall was different. It wasn't schoolboy awkwardness or infatuation. It was something quieter, deeper, something that didn't demand acknowledgement. McGonagall, for her part, showed a consistent softness toward Hagrid that she rarely extended to others. Her standards were high. She was not easily impressed. But she defended Hagrid more than once, even when others questioned his capability. After Hagrid's suspension in Chamber of Secrets, it was McGonagall who took over his duties, but not without protest. Her tone with Dumbledore, usually calm and composed, grew tense. She said little, but her silence was sharp-edged. In The Half-Blood Prince, during Dumbledore's funeral, Hagrid sobbed openly. "He was me, friend," he cried. "He was the best man I ever knew." As the camera panned in the film adaptation, McGonagall reached out, barely touching his arm. A fleeting gesture, yes, but intimate in its own restrained way. In the books, she stood close to Hagrid, never once leaving his side during the ceremonies. The shared grief between them was profound. Their roles as protectors of the school, the last defenders of Dumbledore's legacy, bound them closer than most. And there's another moment, often overlooked, in Order of the Phoenix. When Umbridge dismisses Hagrid and attempts to take control of Hogwarts, McGonagall's fury is uncontainable. "How dare you!" she exclaims, her voice shaking not only with indignation, but personal outrage. She doesn't simply defend Hagrid as a colleague. She defends him as a human being, as someone she clearly values deeply. Hagrid himself never saw himself as worthy of love. "I'm nothing but a half-giant," he once said bitterly. People always think I'm dangerous." This self-perception, rooted in years of rejection and isolation, likely prevented him from ever acting on whatever feelings he may have harbored for McGonagal. He respected her too much to burden her. He probably believed she deserved someone better. But what if that very humility was what endeared him to McGonagal? She, too, bore loneliness. Though stern and proud, she carried her own quiet sadness. J.K. Rowling later revealed that McGonagal had loved once a Muggle man named Dougal McGregor, but she had left him behind, choosing her duty at Hogwarts over a domestic life. She had buried her heart beneath layers of robes and rules. Perhaps in Hagrid she saw a mirror of her own silent sacrifice. They shared more than the castle. They shared a sense of duty. Hagrid cared for the creatures of the world, McGonagal for its minds and morals. Together they were the flesh and bone of Hogwarts. And while Dumbledore was the soul, it was these two who often carried the emotional burdens others ignored. Take, for example, the night Harry is brought to the Dursleys. In the Philosopher's Stone, McGonagal waits all day, disguised as a cat, sitting on a wall. When Hagrid finally arrives with baby Harry on Sirius Black's motorbike, McGonagal's concern is more than just about the child. She looks at Hagrid, who is crying, and says, "You're crying?" It isn't mocking. It's compassionate, almost maternal. But more than that, it's filled with shared sorrow. The kind of sorrow that binds hearts closer than joy. There's also the matter of proximity. Professors lived in the castle, and though their exact quarters aren't described in detail, we know that McGonagal as deputy headmistress and Hagrid as keeper of keys and grounds were frequently involved in administrative matters. They would have eaten at the staff table together, walked the halls late at night, coordinated punishments, planned events. Imagine the thousands of moments unseen by readers, quiet breakfasts before dawn patrols, shared concern over a misbehaving Gryffindor, standing side by side as the castle trembled with threats. Hagrid, too, was deeply loyal. Once he loved someone, he loved them forever. His love for Dumbledore was unwavering, his protection of Harry fierce to the end. If he ever loved McGonagal, it wouldn't have been a passing feeling. It would have been eternal, silent, a constant ache in the background of his days. Fans often point out one particular scene in the Deathly Hallows during the Battle of Hogwarts. Hagrid emerges from the Forbidden Forest, forced by Voldemort to carry Harry's seemingly dead body. His face is twisted with grief, and in that moment McGonagal's cry of despair is described vividly. "No!" she shouts, her voice louder than anyone's. Some say it was for Harry, but others believe her cry encompassed more: the horror of seeing Hagrid suffer, the pain of watching yet another gentle soul crushed by war. Even the way they complimented each other raises eyebrows. McGonagal's rigidity balanced Hagrid's emotional openness. He made her laugh even when she didn't want to. She steadied him when he was unsure. In a world of chaos and dark magic, they were each other's compass. They never had to say the words aloud. Some connections run deeper than speech. One can imagine Hagrid sitting in his hut after a long day, carving wooden figures, pouring tea into giant mugs. Maybe he carved a likeness of McGonagal once, carefully etching the stern brow, the tight bun, the square glasses. Not because he hoped to win her, but because he couldn't help it. Because she meant something. And maybe, late at night, McGonagal would pass by his hut, glance toward the flickering light through the window, and pause. Just for a second. Just long enough to wonder what life might have been like had she allowed herself the risk of vulnerability, the chance of warmth. Was it love? We'll never know for certain. But there is enough scattered through the pages, little gestures, glances, choices, to fuel the hope. And perhaps that's what makes it beautiful. Not every love needs to end in confession or kiss. Some are more powerful in their restraint. In the end, both lived lives of quiet nobility. Hagrid remained the eternal protector, watching over children, beasts, and secrets. McGonagal rose to lead Hogwarts, guarding its legacy with ferocity and grace. They never married, never sought romance again. But in a hidden corner of Hogwarts, perhaps near the greenhouses or the edge of the forbidden forest, there is a place where a tall man once stood beside a proud woman. They said nothing. They only watched the sunrise together, silently letting the golden light fall on their faces. In that silence, there was everything. Number 22, Hagrid is the last of a magical line lost after the war. In the dim corridors of magical history, many ancient names have faded into obscurity, erased not only by time, but also by war. One such forgotten lineage may yet live, buried behind a familiar face, that of Rubeus Hagrid, keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts. He lumbers through life with his greatcoat, wild beard, and teary eyes at the sight of a wounded thestral. But if whispers are to be believed, Hagrid carries something far older than a half-giant's blood. He may be the last living heir of a magical family lost after Voldemort's first rise, a family once powerful and revered, that perhaps held dominion not over politics or prophecy, but over the realm of magical beasts. Hagrid's affinity for magical creatures is legendary. Not merely interest, something deeper, a pull, as though the roar of a dragon or the purr of a manticore sings to a memory coded in his blood. "I brought ye here, didn't I?" he tells Harry, smiling beneath a storm-worn beard. "Took ye from the ruins myself." That same man who rescued the boy who lived is the same who secretly raised Norbert A.A. the dragon, who risked life and limb to feed Aragog in the shadows of the forbidden forest. His very soul seems tangled with the ancient wildness of magical nature. This cannot be coincidence. Some believe Hagrid's bond with creatures, especially the monstrous or misunderstood, stems not just from character, but heritage. There are tales of an old family, the Greylairs, whose name once echoed through the Ministry of Magic's department for the regulation and control of magical creatures. The Greylairs were said to be part of the Sacred 28, quietly erased from public listings after the First Wizarding War. Known for taming chimeras, breeding unicorns, and whispering to centaurs in their own tongue, the Greylairs were never fond of public life or the politics of blood purity. When Voldemort's ideology turned against such traitorous families, especially those who protected the non-human, the Greylairs were among the first to be hunted. Could Hagrid be one of them? He was born in 1928 to a wizard father, a man we never know by name, and a giantess mother, Fridwulfa. But what of his father's lineage? Why is it so obscure, unnamed, as if deliberately hidden? In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Hagrid reveals to Madame Maxime, "Me dad was tiny, by comparison. Couldn't have been more than 5 foot tall, but he was right decent." There's pride and mystery in his voice. Some suspect that Hagrid's father may have been a direct descendant of the last Greylair wizard, perhaps hiding under a new surname after the purges. If this theory holds, then the reason for Albus Dumbledore's unwavering protection of Hagrid becomes clearer. Dumbledore, who saw through illusions and secrets better than any man alive, never once faltered in his defense of Hagrid, even after his expulsion from Hogwarts, after the death of Myrtle Warren, even after the Ministry labelled him dangerous. "I would trust Hagrid with my life," Dumbledore declares more than once. Was it only loyalty, or did Dumbledore feel bound by a promise, perhaps to Hagrid's father, or even to the Greylairs themselves, to protect the last spark of a vanishing line? The grey lairs were, according to several obscure texts, said to possess a peculiar form of magic, one that wasn't wand-based but derived from connection. Theirs was a bloodline that could pacify a rampaging kelpie with a word or lure a thunderbird from the skies with a whisper. Such abilities don't manifest in structured spellcasting, but in presence, essence, and emotional resonance, much like the way Hagrid interacts with beasts others fear. In Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, Buckbeak the Hippogriff bows to Hagrid almost instinctively. "He trusts ye," Hagrid tells Harry. "Animals know, but if Hagrid is truly of this ancient blood, why was it never mentioned in official records?" The answer may lie in the silence of fear. During Voldemort's first reign, any family who defied the supremacy of wizardkind, especially those who elevated beasts and non-humans, were marked for annihilation. The Grey Lairs vanished nearly overnight. Their home in the Scottish Highlands was reportedly burned, their ancestral bestiary destroyed. Some say it was the work of Death Eaters. Others whisper that the Ministry, seeking to distance itself from beast sympathizers, turned a blind eye. Dumbledore, then a rising voice against Voldemort, may have taken it upon himself to shelter what remained of that legacy. When Hagrid's father died, under mysterious circumstances, according to some unverified sources in the Daily Prophet archives, the boy was left alone, half giant, half forgotten. Rather than let the boy vanish into orphanage systems or the perils of anti-giant prejudice, Dumbledore brought him to Hogwarts and gave him work, home, and sanctuary. "It's not Hogwarts without you, Hagrid," he once said. But perhaps it wasn't only sentiment. Perhaps Hogwarts was built, in part, to guard that which magic alone could not protect. Further support for the theory lies in Hagrid's curious resilience. Despite being expelled and having his wand snapped, Hagrid continues to perform acts of magic that should be impossible. His umbrella, presumed to contain remnants of his wand, channels spells with startling effectiveness. In Tyche the Philosopher's Stone, he performs a fire-making spell, enlarges a pig's tail on Dudley, and even levitates cakes. For a man with no formal training, this is exceptional. One could argue that magical blood, not magical education, drives Hagrid's abilities, an inheritance from a forgotten magical race. Moreover, Hagrid's connection to Grawp, his giant half-brother, is unlike any other recorded relationship between giants and humans. While giants are notoriously violent and difficult to reason with, Grawp responds to Hagrid, learns from him, even grieves for him. This level of empathy is rare among giants, unless perhaps Hagrid's bloodline carries the same ancient diplomacy once attributed to the Grey Lairs, who, according to a journal fragment kept in the Hogwarts Library's restricted section, walked among beasts as though among brothers. Consider also the creatures that gravitate toward Hagrid: Aragog, the acromantula, who calls him friend of Hagrid; Fang, who is loyal beyond instinct; and even Thestrals, which allow him to harness them with ease during the battle of the Astronomy Tower. These are not coincidences. They're markers of trust, something deeper than simple domestication. "I am not afraid of any beast," Hagrid once said, and he meant it, but more striking is that no beast is afraid of him. His mother, Fridwulfa, abandoned him. Giants are not known for sentimentality. Yet what if she, too, was drawn to his father, not out of impulse, but because the blood he carried sang to hers? What if the Grey Lair line had such a resonance with all non-human beings, including giants? The match may have been shocking to the wizarding world, but to nature itself, it may have made perfect sense. In Order of the Phoenix, Hagrid recounts how his half-giant status made him the subject of ridicule and fear. "I've been expecting it for years," he mutters after a tabloid exposé. Little bits of me life on sale to the highest bidder. But even as the world doubts him, magical creatures flock to him. This paradox, that the wizarding world mistrusts what magical nature embraces, mirrors the fate of the Greylairs, who were condemned by politics but revered by the wild. Perhaps this is why Hagrid never sought promotion, never left Hogwarts. Perhaps he understood, somewhere in the marrow of his bones, that he was not meant for public life. Like his ancestors, he chose silence, the company of the forest, and the care of the misunderstood. In this, he is not merely a caretaker. He is a guardian of a legacy long buried, one that lives through every creature he protects. If we read between the lines, Dumbledore's final act, entrusting Harry to Hagrid on the night Voldemort fell, takes on a new weight. The Keeper of Keys was not just delivering a boy, he was carrying history, ensuring the protection of the last great secret of a dying world. Hagrid, clumsy and kind, was chosen not despite his oddities, but because of them. What would have happened had the Greylair name survived? Would their teachings have been shared at Hogwarts? Would the magical community be more accepting of beast kind, less prone to ignorance and fear? These are questions with no answers. But perhaps the real answer is that the Greylairs never truly died. They live in the way Buckbeak bows to a boy who shows respect, in the way a giant learns to say his brother's name, in the way Hagrid fights for a dragon's dignity in the face of execution. We may never find parchment records confirming Hagrid's descent. His name will not be restored to a registry, but legacies are not only written in ink, sometimes they're written in the way a man lives. And if love, loyalty, and courage are the marks of a great house, then Rubeus Hagrid, forgotten heir of the wild, Dorkanud has already honoured it. Number 23, Hagrid secretly cared for orphans after the war. It was a cold October night when Albus Dumbledore arrived at number 4, Privet Drive, leaving baby Harry Potter on the doorstep. But in the hours leading up to that moment, chaos reigned across the wizarding world. The Dark Lord had fallen, but the price had been high. Families shattered, homes destroyed, and children left behind in the rubble of a war they didn't understand. In the shadow of this broken world, a gentle half-giant moved silently through the night, doing what no decree or ministry memo had asked of him. He looked after the forgotten. Rubeus Hagrid, Keeper of Keys and Grounds at Hogwarts, is often remembered for his size, his fondness for dangerous creatures, and his emotional heart. But those who truly knew him, Dumbledore, McGonagal, even a few seventh-year Slytherins, saw something else. A quiet, unwavering loyalty to those who needed love most. "I'd die for ye," he once said to Harry, voice shaking with emotion. It wasn't just a phrase, it was a promise that had long defined his life. There's a theory among die-hard fans, whispered on forums, debated in Reddit threads, that after Voldemort's defeat in 1981, Hagrid didn't just return to Hogwarts and resume his duties. He did something far more human. He opened his doors, his heart, and even his fire-warmed hut to the smallest victims of war, wizarding orphans. Take the case of Maisie Rowell. Her story never made it into the Daily Prophet. Daughter of Miriam Rowell, a healer from St. Mungo's, and Andrew Rowell, a half-blood wizard who worked in magical transportation, Maisie was just 4 when her parents were murdered by Death Eaters in the final weeks before the Dark Lord's fall. There was no next of kin. The ministry, overwhelmed by paperwork and the collapse of social services, didn't know where to send her. That's when Professor McGonagal made a quiet flu call to Hagrid's hut. "You've always had a way with the little ones, Rubeus," she reportedly said. Hagrid didn't hesitate. That night he rode into the Forbidden Forest with a thick blanket tucked under one arm and returned with a sleepy, wide-eyed girl clinging to his beard. He never asked for praise. never told the students, but for several weeks, Maisie lived in a small corner of Hagrid's hut, curled up beside Fang, sipping pumpkin broth and listening to tales of dragons and phoenixes. She needed to feel safe, Hagrid confided years later to a former student, now a journalist. And warmth, just warmth, you know? That's all they really need at that age. Another name surfaces in scattered anecdotes, Elliot Forley, rumoured to be a distant cousin of the Forleys who once served on the Wizengamot. He was found wandering the edge of the forbidden forest, clutching a torn bit of parchment that read, "Wait for me, I will come." His parents never did. Some say it was a centaur who led him to Hagrid. Others claim it was Aragog's children, instructed by Hagrid himself to keep watch for lost souls. Elliot never spoke for days, but then one morning he asked Hagrid if dragons liked music. That was all the invitation Hagrid needed. He brought out a battered accordion and played tunes so strange and beautiful they made the firelight dance. "He'd laugh, that one," Hagrid said later. "Real laugh from the belly. That's when I knew he'd be all right." Where did these children go after they left Hagrid's care? That part remains murky. Some were adopted by wizarding families like the Bonuses or the Diggle cousins, others sent to orphanages under new protective enchantments. But during the weeks and months when the ministry was frozen in confusion, it was Hagrid who quietly patched the holes. There's even a hint of this in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. When Dumbledore tells Hagrid to fetch Harry from the ruins of Godric's Hollow, he says, "I would trust Hagrid with my life." That trust was not born in a day. It was earned, child by child, through countless acts of compassion that never made it into official records. In fact, Sirius Black himself may have known of Hagrid's underground shelter for war orphans. Though their encounter on the night of the Potters' deaths was brief, Sirius gave Hagrid his motorbike, insisting, "I won't need it anymore." But there's an odd edge to that moment. As if Sirius knew Hagrid would have more passengers than just Harry, some believe that during that chaotic November, Hagrid used the bike not just to transport one boy, but to make a series of nocturnal flights, delivering children to temporary safe houses, ferrying them through clouds and moonlight, cradled in the sidecar that once held a future saviour. And what of Dumbledore? It's hard to believe that he didn't know. In fact, it's likely that he encouraged it. The great chessmaster of the Order, Albus may have realized that love, in its rawest form, had to come from someone like Hagrid, someone who had lost, who had suffered, and who understood what it meant to be different, even abandoned. "Do not pity the dead, Harry," Dumbledore once said. "Pity the living, and above all, those who live without love." Perhaps he meant those who had been under Hagrid's care. There's an unconfirmed but persistent story about a girl named Lottie Binns, possibly related to the ghostly history of magic professor. She was mute when she arrived. One day she wandered too far into the forest and nearly got caught in a nest of acromantulas. Hagrid saved her, of course, but not before she whispered her first words in weeks. "Don't let go." He didn't. Years later, when asked about the scars on his arms, ones that didn't seem to match any known magical creature, Hagrid waved them off. "Old burns," he said, but one of his colleagues from care of magical creatures remembered otherwise. "They look like something else," the professor mused, "as if he'd gone into a burning house, or pulled someone out of one. These are not tales taught in Hogwarts history classes. They don't appear in Rita Skeeter's interviews or make headlines in The Prophet. But to those who remember the quiet nights when the war ended and the world tried to piece itself back together, these stories linger like smoke." One particular testimony from Daedalus Diggle supports the idea. "Saw him once," he told a reporter decades later. "In the forest, just past dawn, he was carrying a child on his back and humming some lullaby I didn't recognize. didn't say a word to me, just nodded, eyes red. Even Fang, Hagrid's loyal boarhound, seemed unusually protective during those years. Wouldn't let students near the hut without sniffing them first, one fifth-year recalled, like he was guarding something precious. Years after the war, when Harry visited Hagrid's hut for tea, he once asked about a small, carved stool in the corner, clearly too tiny for someone like Hagrid. The half-giant blinked and said, "Just as something I made. Habit, I guess." But then he paused. "Used to have a few lil ones round after the war, before you came back. They needed something their size." We often think of war in terms of grand gestures, wands raised, spells cast, dark lords defeated. But sometimes the most heroic acts happen quietly, away from the battlefield, in a small hut warmed by fire, in cups of treacle fudge shared over candlelight, in bedtime stories whispered over stormy nights. If the theory is true, and many believe it is, then Hagrid saved more than magical creatures and misplaced keys. He saved childhoods. He gave hope where there was none, and he did it all without asking for thanks. As Harry himself once said, Hagrid was the first person to ever give me a real birthday cake, the first person to say I mattered. Perhaps, just perhaps, he wasn't the only child to feel that way, and maybe that's why, even years later, the Forbidden Forest seems to hold more than just centaurs and unicorns. Maybe it holds memories of laughter, of songs played on a broken accordion, of a warm hand holding a smaller one through the darkest times. Hagrid never had children of his own, but that doesn't mean he wasn't a father, not by blood, by choice. And for those forgotten orphans of the First Wizarding War, that choice may have made all the difference. Number 24, Hagrid knew the prophecy before Harry did. It was the way Hagrid looked at Harry the first time they met. Not just with affection, but with a peculiar mix of awe, sadness, and restraint. He stood there, towering over the boy in the hut on the rock, his voice booming, "You're a wizard, Harry." But his eyes said more than his words ever could. Something haunted them. Something that had lived within him long before that night. Something far older than the birthday cake in his coat pocket or the broken pink umbrella tucked into his belt. Some fans believe that what lived in Hagrid's eyes that night was the knowledge of the prophecy. The prophecy, the one that told of a child born at the end of July, marked as Voldemort's equal. It had been spoken by Sybil Trelawney to Albus Dumbledore in the Hogshead, and was stored in the Department of Mysteries under lock, orb, and veil. But who really knew about it? We're told Dumbledore kept it close, only revealing its contents to Harry in Order of the Phoenix. Yet Hagrid was always near the heart of Dumbledore's plans, his loyalty deeper than blood, proven time and time again. It begs the question, did Hagrid know about the prophecy all along? Let's go back to that night. No one but Dumbledore seemed to think Harry was safe with the Dursleys, J.K. Rowling writes, in the Philosopher's Stone. Yet Hagrid, who had just risked everything to retrieve the boy from the ruins of Godric's Hollow, never questioned the decision. He simply nodded, placed baby Harry into Petunia's arms, and vanished into the night. If he had only been told the basic facts, wouldn't he have protested? Wouldn't the gentle giant who later battled spiders and Death Eaters for Harry's sake have argued that a boy like him deserved more? But he didn't, because perhaps he understood that Harry needed to grow in obscurity, just as the prophecy required. And it wasn't just that moment. Years later, when Harry begins to encounter danger at Hogwarts, the troll, the Philosopher's Stone, the basilisk, Hagrid never seems truly surprised. Concerned, yes. Frustrated, definitely. But surprised, never. In fact, His reactions are eerily measured, as if he knew all along that Harry's path would be tangled with trials. As if he had long ago accepted that Harry wasn't just the boy who lived, but the boy who must live and must face what was coming. Let's not forget Hagrid's closeness to Dumbledore. Hagrid was expelled from Hogwarts at 13, yet Dumbledore never abandoned him. He brought him back, gave him work, and trusted him with dangerous, secret missions. It was Hagrid whom Dumbledore trusted to retrieve the Philosopher's Stone from Gringotts. Hagrid who was chosen to fetch Harry when the time came. Hagrid who was given the instructions to guide Harry into the magical world, not just in logistics, but with gentle, emotional care. Why would Dumbledore give such responsibilities to someone who didn't understand the full gravity of the situation? We see more hints in the Chamber of Secrets. When students start getting petrified, and Harry begins hearing voices no one else can, Hagrid's concern rises, but he doesn't panic. Even as he's dragged off to Azkaban, he cryptically tells Harry and Ron, if anyone wanted to find out some stuff, all they'd have to do would be to follow the spiders. It's as if he knows that Harry will have to keep digging, that the truth won't be handed to him but must be earned, just as the path of the chosen one demands. His messages, often buried in riddles and half-formed advice, sound like the words of someone who can't say everything, someone who knows too much. But the most telling example comes in the Goblet of Fire. After Harry's name emerges from the goblet, Hagrid becomes visibly unsettled. He doesn't join the chorus of doubters, not because he believes in Harry's innocence alone, but because he understands this is another step in a bigger design. Later, when Hagrid takes Harry into the Forbidden Forest to meet the dragons before the first task, he does so not with the wide-eyed enthusiasm of a creature-loving gamekeeper, but with a nervous edge, pacing, unable to look Harry in the eye. He says quietly, "You'll do all right, Harry, I know you will." It's not just encouragement, it's a confirmation. He knows Harry must survive. He knows Harry will survive because the prophecy demands it. We also see something strange in The Half-Blood Prince when Hagrid attends Dumbledore's funeral. He is utterly broken, not just with grief, but with helplessness. For a man who had seen so much, fought so hard, carried the corpses of friends in his arms, this loss seems to strike deeper. And it's not just about the man, it's about the burden Dumbledore carried. A burden Hagrid may have been helping to carry quietly all these years. Because if Dumbledore was gone, who would guide the boy now? Who would see the prophecy fulfilled? Let us remember, Hagrid never once asked Harry why he was constantly being targeted. Not once. Most teachers, students, even the ministry speculated endlessly, but not Hagrid. He simply accepted it. He didn't need to question, he already knew. When Harry told him in Order of the Phoenix that Voldemort had returned, Hagrid just nodded grimly. He didn't gasp. He didn't doubt. He said, "I figured he would." The simplicity of those words carries weight, as if he had known it was only a matter of time. Even in Deathly Hallows during the Battle of Hogwarts, Hagrid's reaction to Harry's death is deeply telling. When Harry gives himself up to Voldemort in the forest, Hagrid is captured and forced to watch. His anguish is raw, but underneath it there is something else. He doesn't scream accusations. He doesn't blame Harry. He doesn't curse fate. It's as though, heartbreak aside, he knew this moment had to happen. That this, too, was part of the road Harry had to walk. And when Harry returns, alive and triumphant, Hagrid is the first to carry him back, the same way he carried him from the ruins of his home all those years ago. Full circle. There's a particular quote in The Philosopher's Stone that deserves more scrutiny. After delivering Harry to Privet Drive, Hagrid breaks down. "I suppose I really shouldn't be saying this," he mutters, "but it's not right. You're not knowing what's happened." That line is often overlooked, but in light of this theory, it gains new meaning. Hagrid isn't just speaking of Harry's parents. He's mourning the weight the boy doesn't yet understand, the destiny he's already chained to, and there's more. Dumbledore never treated Hagrid as a mere subordinate. He confided in him, entrusted him with classified tasks. When Voldemort returned, it was Hagrid Dumbledore sent to parley with the giants. A suicide mission, some might say, unless you were sending someone who understood what was at stake. Hagrid accepted the task without hesitation, not for glory, not even for love, but perhaps because he knew this was necessary. Just like every step Harry had to take. Let's look at the moment Hagrid defends Harry in the Order of the Phoenix, when Umbridge tries to slander him. Hagrid stands firm, even under threat of dismissal, because he's not just defending a student, he's defending the boy fated to face the Dark Lord. He says, there's things more important than keeping a job. Truer words were never spoken, because when you carry a secret like that, jobs and rules and protocol all fall away. Of course, Dumbledore never confirmed Hagrid's knowledge of the prophecy, but Dumbledore also rarely confirmed anything. He operated in riddles, in veils, in trust, and Hagrid was one of the very few people he trusted with his life. As McGonagal once said, if Dumbledore trusts Hagrid, then I trust Hagrid. That trust wasn't blind, it was earned over decades through battles, trials, and heartache. If Dumbledore needed someone to know the truth, someone who wouldn't use it, wouldn't fear it, wouldn't try to change it, Hagrid was the perfect choice. And what if Hagrid knew the prophecy but didn't know all of it? That would explain his behavior perfectly. He might have known that Harry had to face Voldemort, that he was marked, that there would be a final confrontation, but maybe he didn't know the outcome. Maybe he didn't know about the Horcrux inside Harry, or the details of the Elder Wand. That's why he watched with such heavy eyes, helped with such gentle hands, because he knew where the road led, but not whether it would end in life or death. This also gives weight to his silence. Hagrid is many things. He's brave, loyal, kind, but he's not a skilled liar. The best way to protect a secret with someone like Hagrid is not to forbid him from sharing it, but to let him carry it as part of his heart, not his mouth. It becomes a truth he lives, not one he speaks. That's why, when pressed, he deflects with dragons or rock cakes or tales of Aragog. He knows, but he's promised not to say. And maybe, just maybe, Hagrid's deepest sorrow wasn't in watching Harry walk into danger, but in knowing he couldn't stop it, in knowing he had known for so long and could do nothing but walk beside him. That's the burden of a seer without sight, a guardian who knows the storm is coming but cannot change the wind. So the next time you reread the series, watch Hagrid closely. Look at the way he hesitates before answering, the way he stares too long, the way he always seems to expect the worst. There's something there, something old, something secret. A quiet man with giant hands, holding the weight of a prophecy he never asked for and never betrayed. Perhaps the most magical part of the entire story is this, that while prophecies may be written and destinies may be forged in shadowy rooms, the people who carry them quietly, faithfully, without recognition, are often the real heroes. Hagrid, the keeper of keys and grounds, and maybe a prophecy. Number 25, Hagrid, was once on the brink of joining the dark side. Rubeus Hagrid, with his massive frame and childlike warmth, is often remembered as the gentle half-giant who cared for dangerous creatures and held a special place in Harry Potter's heart. Yet few stop to consider that Hagrid's life could have taken a far darker turn. In fact, if not for a few key choices and the unwavering belief of Albus Dumbledore, he might have stood on the other side of the war, fighting not for the light, but for Voldemort. Hagrid's early life was marked by isolation and ridicule. Born to a wizard father and a giantess mother, he never truly belonged to either world. Giants were feared and shunned by wizarding society, while the magical world regarded Hagrid as an anomaly, a creature of brute strength and little refinement. At Hogwarts he was sorted into Gryffindor, a testament to his bravery, but it wasn't long before he was falsely accused of opening the Chamber of Secrets in his 3rd year. The expulsion was swift, his wand was snapped, he was banished to the fringes of society, his name tainted by suspicion and fear. The real culprit, as we later learn, was Tom Riddle, who would go on to become Lord Voldemort. The irony is cruel. Riddle not only framed Hagrid, but also planted the seeds of bitterness that could have blossomed into something much darker. Imagine being 15, wrongfully punished, your education destroyed, your reputation shattered, while your accuser walks free. Few would have had the strength not to fall into hatred. Hagrid's story is not just about kindness, it's about resisting bitterness in the face of profound injustice. There's a moment in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets when Dumbledore says, "It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities." While these words are spoken to Harry, they echo Hagrid's life just as powerfully. Hagrid had every reason to hate the wizarding world. The ministry took away his wand. The students whispered behind his back. Even as a grown man, people like Lucius Malfoy sneered at him, calling him oaf and half-breed. And yet, he chose love. But some fans have suggested that this choice wasn't always certain. In the years following his expulsion, when he was living in a hut on the Hogwarts grounds, a young Rubeus Hagrid would have been lonely, angry, and hurt. This, theorists argue, is precisely when Voldemort may have approached him. Voldemort was known to recruit from the margins, those with grievances, those with something to prove. He recruited werewolves, giants, outcasts. Hagrid, with his size and strength, would have been an ideal ally, especially since he already had a bond with magical creatures, including some that terrified even the Auras. Consider this. In Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore reveals that Voldemort had a habit of visiting Hogwarts even after graduation, often under the pretext of applying for the Defense Against the Dark Arts job. He wanted to stay close to the school. He hoped perhaps to control it, Dumbledore explains. During one of these visits, long before the rise of the First Wizarding War, Voldemort could easily have encountered Hagrid again. It's not impossible to imagine a private conversation somewhere deep in the Forbidden Forest where Tom Riddle reminded Hagrid of the injustice he'd suffered. "They cast you out, Rubeus. They broke your wand. They treat you like a beast, but I see your power." This kind of manipulation was Voldemort's hallmark. He didn't always threaten, he seduced. He offered power to those who had none. Bellatrix Lestrange, once a pure-blood aristocrat, fell under his spell not through fear, but through adoration. Even the timid Professor Quirrell was turned by flattery and ambition. If Voldemort had ever whispered to Hagrid that he could have his wand back or be respected or walk proudly among his kind, who's to say how close Hagrid came to accepting? And yet he didn't. The reason, many believe, is Albus Dumbledore. After Hagrid was expelled, it was Dumbledore who fought to allow him to stay on the Hogwarts grounds. Dumbledore saw something in him that no one else did. Not just kindness, but potential. In Philosopher's Stone, Hagrid tells Harry, "Dumbledore's the greatest headmaster Hogwarts ever had. He's a bit mad, mind you, but he believed in me." That belief wasn't just comforting, it was transformational. The relationship between Hagrid and Dumbledore wasn't merely one of employer and groundskeeper. Dumbledore became a surrogate father figure to Hagrid, filling the void left by his own father, who died during Hagrid's time at school. It's not hard to imagine that at his darkest moments, Hagrid remembered that one man had stood by him. That memory might have been the only thing anchoring him to the light. Another key influence was his connection to magical creatures. To most wizards, monsters like dragons, hippogriffs, and acromantulas were threats. But to Hagrid, they were misunderstood beings deserving of care. This empathy, rare even among the most educated witches and wizards, likely kept him from ever becoming truly cruel. Even when he raised Aragog, a creature capable of killing dozens, he loved it with genuine affection. "Never meant to hurt no one," Hagrid says of Aragog. "I told you, he never attacked no one unless he was threatened." This is not the speech of someone who revels in power or fear. It is the speech of someone who seeks connection in the most unlikely places. Yet, even decades after his expulsion, traces of resentment lingered. When Umbridge insulted him during her reign at Hogwarts, calling his lessons a disgrace, Hagrid's response was uncharacteristically subdued. He didn't protest, but his pain was visible. His past had taught him that fighting back often made things worse. But silence doesn't mean he wasn't tempted to lash out. The difference is he never did. There's an unspoken strength in Hagrid's restraint. He was physically capable of destroying his enemies. He could have crushed Draco Malfoy when the boy insulted him. He could have unleashed Fang on Lucius Malfoy. He could have refused to follow ministry orders. But he didn't. He followed Dumbledore. He protected Harry. He buried his pain beneath layers of kindness and tea cakes and dragon eggs. Even when the Death Eaters returned and the Second Wizarding War broke out, Hagrid remained loyal. He fought alongside the Order of the Phoenix, risked his life to smuggle Harry out of Privet Drive, and stood firm during the Battle of Hogwarts. In Deathly Hallows, as he carries what he believes to be Harry's dead body, his sorrow is palpable. "No, no, Harry! Harry!" he screams. It is not the cry of a soldier. It is the cry of a heartbroken father figure, a man who chose love over vengeance, again and again. The truth is, Hagrid's kindness was not born of naivety. It was forged in pain. That is what makes his story so compelling. He knew what it felt like to be hated. He knew what it felt like to be framed, ridiculed, rejected. And still he chose not to become the very thing he hated. In many ways his story mirrors Harry's. Both were orphans, both were misunderstood, both faced Voldemort. But where Harry's temptation came in the form of power, Hagrid's came in the form of bitterness. And yet imagine how different the story would be if Hagrid had made another choice. If, in some quiet moment in the woods, Voldemort had persuaded him to turn. The Death Eaters would have gained a powerful ally, one who knew Hogwarts better than anyone, one who could have opened the gates from within, one who could have taught them to tame monsters and use them in battle. The very same gentle giant who gave Harry his first birthday cake could have been the one to break down the castle doors, but he didn't. He chose to bring children to safety, to fight for the innocent, to mend wounds, not inflict them. Hagrid's greatness is not in his magic or his strength or his knowledge. It is in his choices. As Sirius Black once said, the world isn't divided into good people and Death Eaters. It is divided by the choices we make when no one is watching. Hagrid made the right one. Perhaps the most poignant tribute to Hagrid's moral compass comes from the way others see him. Harry, Ron, and Hermione trust him implicitly. The Weasleys treat him like family. Even McGonagal, strict and stern, respects him. And Dumbledore? He trusted Hagrid with the most important task of all, delivering baby Harry to safety on the night Voldemort fell. "I would trust Hagrid with my life," he said. In a world of shifting loyalties and hidden agendas, Hagrid remained constant, and maybe that is why he is so beloved, not just because he was kind, but because he fought to be. His story reminds us that kindness is not weakness, that forgiveness is not surrender, and that even when you've been cast into darkness, you can still choose the light. Not because it is easy, but because it is right. Number 26. Hagrid might have been a druid. The fire crackled in Hagrid's hearth the night Harry first stepped foot into his hut. Outside, the forbidden forest loomed, its trees swaying under a mysterious wind that seemed to whisper secrets. Inside, Fang let out a low grumble, and Hagrid stirred his tea with a spoon so large it might have been mistaken for a ladle. "Strange weather, this," Hagrid muttered. "Forest don't like it. Trees been restless since this morning." To many, it was just a remark. To others, especially those who paid close attention to the peculiar ways of magic, it was a clue. Rubeus Hagrid had always been something of an enigma at Hogwarts. A half-giant with a heart as vast as his frame, he was beloved by some, feared by others, and misunderstood by most. His presence in the series was marked not only by his loyalty and kindness, but by his uncanny relationship with the natural world. And perhaps, hidden beneath his tangled beard and dragon-hide overcoat, there existed a secret far older than even Dumbledore suspected, the legacy of the Druids. Many fans have long noted that Hagrid rarely uses magic in the way his fellow witches and wizards do. He has a wand, or rather, had one, snapped in half after his unjust expulsion from Hogwarts, but it is rarely seen. When he does perform magic, it's subtle, almost primal. He doesn't utter Latin incantations, nor does he flick and swish like Flitwick. Instead, he exerts influence in more organic ways, calming beasts, nurturing monstrous plants, even anticipating changes in the weather. Take, for instance, his uncanny bond with Aragog, the acromantula he raised from an egg. "I met him in a travelling circus," Hagrid told Harry once. "Could tell he was special, frightened but special." The mere idea of raising such a creature defies logic, yet Hagrid not only did so, he earned Aragog's lifelong loyalty. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, even when Aragog is old and blind, he greets Hagrid with reverence, saying, "Hagrid has never sent me a human to eat before." Why such loyalty? One theory suggests that Hagrid's connection to creatures like Aragog wasn't just based on compassion, but on an ancient magic, an ancestral gift passed down through bloodlines that once belonged to Druidic orders. These were not magicians in the modern sense. They did not channel power through wands and words. Their magic was older, wilder, drawn directly from the living world around them. This may explain Hagrid's relationship with Buckbeak. Most wizards wouldn't dare approach a hippogriff without months of preparation. Hagrid strides into their paddock like an old friend. "Ye always bow first," he instructs the class. "Then wait. If he bows back, ye can approach." He doesn't command Buckbeak with spells. He communicates with respect, body language, and instinct. That is not taught at Hogwarts, that is remembered. The Druids of ancient Britain were revered for their ability to read the signs of nature, to understand the moods of forests and rivers, to summon the rain or calm a storm. It is no coincidence that Hagrid is often the first to notice when the natural order is disturbed. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, he's deeply unsettled by the stormy skies that roll over the school. "Summat ain't right," he says. "The forest's gone quiet." A quiet forest is not a small thing. It means the birds have stopped singing, the centaurs have paused their patrols, even the spiders have ceased their endless migration. Hagrid feels this not as an intellectual observation, but as an emotional one, as though the world itself is whispering warnings into his soul. That is the essence of Druidic magic, intuition tied to the breath of the earth. There are also his plants. Unlike Professor Sprout, whose approach to herbology is academic and structured, Hagrid's relationship with flora borders on mysticism. He grows pumpkins the size of bathtubs with no visible enchantments. He coaxes dangerous plants into tameness. In Harry Potter, and the goblet of fire, he nurtures blast-ended scroots, half-plant, half-beast horrors with nothing more than care and bizarre dietary choices, who in their right magical mind would even attempt such a feat. Only someone with an understanding not just of magical biology, but of the balance of nature itself. Even more compelling is Hagrid's affinity for the Forbidden Forest, a place feared by nearly every student at Hogwarts. To them, it's a realm of nightmares. To Hagrid, it's home. He walks between centaur camps, spider colonies, and werewolf haunts with an ease that speaks of something beyond courage. It speaks of belonging. He once said to Harry, "I've known the forest since I was a lad. Grew up with it, I did." That statement, innocent on the surface, might be the key to everything, because the Druids were known to live in sacred groves, hidden forests where they practiced rituals and guarded ancient wisdom. What if the Forbidden Forest wasn't just a dangerous place, but the last remnant of a Druidic stronghold, and Hagrid, raised near its roots, was its unwitting heir? Hagrid's deep respect for centaurs is another telling detail. These are creatures who despise wizards, seeing them as meddlesome and arrogant. Yet they tolerate Hagrid. Firenze, the noble centaur, once said, "Hagrid has shown us more respect than any wizard." This is not an idle compliment. It implies kinship. Centaurs, too, are tied to the stars and the earth. If they see Druidic blood in Hagrid, they would sense it immediately. Let's not forget his bizarre sensitivity to weather. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the day Voldemort returns to life, Hagrid pauses, sniffing the air. "Storm's brewing," he murmurs, looking toward the sky. Sure enough, clouds gather within hours. A coincidence? Or an inherited ability to read the balance of nature, another hallmark of ancient Druidic practice? Some might argue that Hagrid simply has an instinctive touch, that he's just good with animals. But that explanation falls flat when you consider the sheer scale of what he handles: dragons, hippogriffs, thestrals, acromantulas, creatures that defy domestication. Yet they respond to Hagrid like cubs to a parent. He doesn't tame them, he honours them. And then there's Norbert, the Norwegian ridgeback. Even newborn, the dragon's temperament is volatile, yet Hagrid cradles him like a newborn. "He's beautiful, isn't he?" he says with tears in his eyes. The rest of the castle sees danger. Hagrid sees life. In ancient lore, dragons were seen not only as threats, but as sacred guardians, symbols of wisdom and power. The Druids respected them, believed them to be elemental forces of the world. Hagrid's reverence echoes that belief. Let us recall the pink umbrella, his modified wand, a mockery to some, but perhaps a symbol of something deeper. If Hagrid is indeed connected to Druidic traditions, his wand, even broken, is merely a tool. His true power flows from within, channeled through intention, not incantation. The umbrella is a charm, a focus, not a necessity. One cannot help but notice the symbolic parallels either. Druids were often associated with oaks, guardians of ancient woods, speakers to birds and beasts. Hagrid, towering like an old tree himself, feels carved from that very myth. His hut is on the edge of the forest, a liminal space between the ordered world of Hogwarts and the untamed world beyond. Just as Druids stood between the human and the divine, Hagrid exists between the magical and the natural. Even his role as keeper of keys and grounds speaks to ancient traditions. Druids were the keepers of knowledge, the guides through sacred places. Hagrid holds the keys to every door at Hogwarts. He introduces Harry not only to the school, but to the very idea of the magical world. He is the threshold guardian, a classic archetype in mythology, the one who opens the way. His reluctance to harm, too, is notable. Even when provoked, he hesitates. In The Order of the Phoenix, When attacked by Ministry wizards, Hagrid endures blow after blow before retaliating. He only acts when Fang is hurt. This restraint, this oath to do no harm unless necessary, mirrors the ethics of many ancient magical traditions, including the Druids, who revered life in all its forms. And consider Hagrid's mother, Fridwulfa, a giantess. Her name, Norse in origin, might connect Hagrid not only to giant blood, but to ancient earth-based belief systems that predate organized wizardry. Druidism often incorporated diverse spiritual traditions, blending bloodlines and teachings from surrounding cultures. Hagrid's mixed heritage may not be a flaw, as the Ministry believes, but a sign of something rare and powerful. Then there is his expulsion. Was it truly about the Chamber of Secrets? Or was there fear of what he represented? A magic too old, too wild, to fit the Ministry's categories. Wizards have always feared what they cannot control. Dumbledore, in his wisdom, kept Hagrid close, not only out of kindness, but perhaps out of recognition. In the end, Hagrid never fits the mold. He is neither professor nor student, not entirely man nor giant. He speaks the language of nature, carries the secrets of beasts, and walks with an ease between worlds. His magic is not measured in spells cast or potions brewed, but in the calm he brings to creatures the world calls monsters. Maybe that's the point. In a world obsessed with structure, Hagrid is the reminder that there are other kinds of magic, older, wilder, truer. And maybe, just maybe, the heart of that magic beats still beneath the roots of the Forbidden Forest, where one Druid's descendant still walks. Number 27, Hagrid, died in an alternate ending. It begins with a forest, silent and damp, the scent of moss heavy in the air. A half-giant walks through the mist, his enormous hands trembling, his beard wet with tears. In his arms, Harry Potter, lifeless, eyes closed, head fallen to one side. This moment, seared into the memory of every reader of Deathly Hallows, has become one of the most emotionally charged scenes in the entire series. But what if that scene was not merely symbolic? What if, in another version of the story, it was Hagrid's final act? According to a persistent fan theory, J.K. Rowling originally intended for Rubeus Hagrid to die in the final installment of the Harry Potter saga, not in a blaze of glory like Fred Weasley, not with quiet dignity like Remus and Tonks, but in the Forbidden Forest, alongside the boy he had once carried into the wizarding world. Hagrid, the first magical person Harry ever met, would also be the last to stand beside him, dying perhaps, so that Harry might live. This theory, long whispered in corners of the fandom, draws its strength from the emotional density of the Deathly Hallows. No character is treated with more quiet reverence in the final chapters than Hagrid. His appearances are brief, but the weight they carry is immeasurable. From the Battle of Hogwarts to the scene in the forest, every word he speaks trembles with finality. The Hagrid we meet in Book 7 feels aged, exhausted, haunted even. There's something about him that seems already half gone. It's the forest scene that anchors this theory most firmly. "No!" Hagrid roars when he sees Harry, apparently dead, in Voldemort's arms. Later, it is Hagrid who carries Harry's body back to the castle, his massive frame shaking with sobs. "Harry!" bellowed Hagrid, so that birds rose, shrieking into the sky, and even the jeering Death Eaters looked momentarily abashed. Deathly Hallows, Chapter 36. Why Hagrid? Why out of all the characters is he chosen to carry Harry's seemingly lifeless body? Fans argue that Rowling wanted to bring the story full circle. In Philosopher's Stone, it is Hagrid who cradles baby Harry in his arms as he delivers him to the Dursleys. The moment is peaceful, almost sacred. Nearly 2 decades later, in a cruel echo of that night, Hagrid is made to carry Harry once more, but now through death's cold gate. The poetry is undeniable. The symmetry is devastating. But imagine this symmetry taken further. Imagine Hagrid falling beside Harry in the forest, perhaps in a moment of self-sacrifice, leaping to shield him from a killing curse. Imagine Voldemort snarling, "Kill the half-breed too," and a flash of green light. Harry awakens later to find Hagrid's body sprawled beside his. The same arms that once tucked him beneath a dragon-hide coat now lie limp in the dirt. That would be the end of Hagrid, not just as a character, but as a symbol of protection, warmth, and unshakable loyalty. J.K. Rowling has admitted in interviews that the fates of several characters changed over the course of writing the series. She originally planned for Arthur Weasley to die in Order of the Phoenix, but spared him at the last moment. Conversely, characters like Tonks and Lupin were later added to the casualty list, even though they had once been intended to survive. So, could Hagrid have been on the chopping block too? In a 2007 interview with Time, Rowling confessed, "I did seriously consider killing off a major character who survived in the end, and I changed my mind. That decision was incredibly emotional for me. It was about more than plot. It was about what the readers needed." She refused to name the character, but fans have long speculated that she meant Hagrid. Who else could provoke such a deep emotional conflict? The hints lie not just in interviews, but in how Hagrid is portrayed in the last book. He is no longer the bumbling, affable gamekeeper of old. He is weary, diminished. His resistance group at Hogwarts is violently crushed. His hut is burned. Fang is missing. Hagrid himself is captured, imprisoned, and nearly killed by the Death Eaters. There is an undeniable sense that his story is drawing to a close. Even the dialogue changes. Hagrid becomes more contemplative. During the Battle of Hogwarts, when chaos reigns around him, he doesn't shout orders or charge into danger. He searches for Harry. He calls for his students. He tries to protect. "Harry, no, you can't. They'll kill you," he screams when Harry makes the walk into the forest. Deathly Hallows, Chapter 34. And yet moments later, he is made to carry Harry's body, an action that fans interpret as part of his own farewell. What's particularly haunting is how Rowling writes that scene. She lingers on Hagrid's grief. He carried Harry back toward the castle, the body so light in his arms and yet the burden so impossibly heavy. Why spend so much emotional ink on this moment if it was merely a matter of logistics? The answer perhaps lies in a discarded version of the ending, one where the scene is not about symbolic closure, but literal death. The idea that Rowling changed her mind at the last second is not far-fetched. Deathly Hallows was an enormous emotional undertaking for her. In a televised interview, she broke down while writing the Forest Again chapter. "That was the moment," she said, "where I realized Harry was ready to die, and I wept because I knew he wasn't going alone." Her words struck a chord. Who wasn't going alone? She never clarified.